Thanks so much, Greg, and Inspiring Workplaces and others. Really glad to be here today. Thanks for the kind introduction, and I'm hoping I didn't overpromise on the presentation synopsis. We are definitely going to talk about conversations, and I'm looking forward to that. After kind of going through the prep, though, I'm thinking maybe this is a little bit more of a public service announcement. And I think those can also be really, really powerful. So I think you'll learn some things along the way, but more than anything, I hope it will just stimulate your thinking a little bit about the role conversations can play in the workplace, and really, frankly, how powerful they can be. So thanks again to Inspiring Workplaces for inviting me to share some of my thoughts. I love this organization, how it thinks about work, and what it does to get others to think about work, how it does that. It's done in really, really meaningful ways, and I think it's impacting our professional lives in ways that matter. So thanks to you guys for that. And thanks for inviting me again to be here. So in my 30+ year career, I've kind of bounced around on my own philosophical platform related to HR, workforce, employment, people, employee experience, culture. Pick your favorite workplace dynamic. I like shiny objects just as much as the next guy, but I've definitely become more and more wary of those shiny objects in my years. One thing that really keeps nagging at me, though, is this whole thing that we call employee experience really shouldn't be this hard. Like, why the hell do we make it so hard? I feel like we just kind of go round and round and round about it. I mean, we have conferences and certifications and webinars and awards and Inspirathons, and they're all about talking. They're all about trying to do it better. I don't care if we're talking about benefits or hiring or rewards or recognition or compensation, performance management, learning, ER, anything. Like, we need to keep doing all of that better, faster, and stronger. And it's important work. I mean, if culture is ultimately the accumulation of every behavior and action and value or belief that your employees experience every single day, all of those things are part of that. Sure. And we've heard a lot about culture over the last decade, certainly 5 years, certainly. Everything from culture eats strategy for breakfast, people leave managers, not companies, blah, blah, blah. And I generally buy into all of that. I really, really do. It's hard to argue with. But even that can be like so esoteric. Organizations have been trying to package culture and employee experience into some sort of program for years, for decades. Culture, retention, employee experience, it's not a program. It's an outcome. And I'm increasingly convinced that the one thing that can influence that outcome, maybe more than anything, is very simply a better conversation. Now, on the surface, this is intuitive. Like, some of you are already probably saying, duh. And some of you are also probably saying it's not that simple. And you're both probably right, at least partially. But we don't always have to make it hard. Like, conversations, meaningful conversations, are at the core, very literally at the core of who we are. Human beings, more than any other animal, are described as being communal and social by nature. And that comes from evolution, the way our brains have evolved, the social and emotional development that really begins from day one, the first day that we were born and raised by those around us. That's been informed by the culture and the societal realities that we've created for ourselves, and what has ultimately turned into this need for emotional and psychological well-being. And while we do have the capacity for individuality, and we can exist independently, at least to some extent, our species has thrived and evolved in the context of social groups and communities. And it's a fundamental aspect of our existence. Our social connections play a critical role in our lives, and there is no denying. Not only do I believe that meaningful conversations drive meaningful employee experiences, but maybe more crucially, the absence thereof can and will ruin any community, including your workplace. I'm hoping that some of you, many of you, maybe have seen and even had a chance to digest the U.S. Surgeon General's position paper. I think it was launched in May or thereabouts, on what Dr. Murthy has dubbed an epidemic of loneliness and isolation. And I quote, "Our epidemic of loneliness and isolation has been an underappreciated public health crisis that has harmed individual and societal health. Our relationships are a source of healing and well-being hiding in plain sight, one that can help us live healthier, more fulfilled, and more productive lives." And he goes on to declare, his team declares that the physical health consequences of poor or insufficient connection include a 29% increased risk of heart disease, 32% increased risk of stroke, a 50% increased risk of developing dementia for older adults. And check this out: lacking social connection increases risk of premature death by more than 60%. Like, what WTF? Do you believe this? Like, I do. I really, really do. I experience it every day. Side note, if you're still debating on whether to get your people back into the office, like, stop the debate. Get them back into the office. I know that can be a very unpopular opinion, but frankly, I don't care. One of Dr. Murthy's explicit solutions or remedies for this epidemic, by the way, and this is apropos, and I promise I'll move off this particular topic, but it is to reform our digital environments and to critically evaluate our relationship with technology and ensure that how we interact digitally does not detract from meaningful and healing connections with others. If you think Zoom and Zoom alone will help your people thrive, I think you're sadly mistaken. So what do we do about all of this? How do we embrace, I guess, what has become the very fabric of who we are and what we need to survive? How do we turn that into a competitive advantage in the workplace? Well, I mean, let's connect, but let's do it intentionally. Let's literally cultivate an environment in which our people can commune and communicate, and most importantly, converse. So human beings obviously are not the only animals that communicate, but the nature and the complexity of our communication are certainly distinct. So other primates certainly can and are known for their own complex social behaviors and communication systems, their vocalizations, their gestures and body language. Dolphins and whales click and whistle and sing, and so do birds, and bees dance, and ants use chemicals. But the complexity and richness of the human language and conversations are unparalleled by any. We use sounds, but also a complex system of grammar and syntax, consciousness allows us to convey this crazy range of ideas, emotions, and of course, information. Most interestingly, though, and most unique, is that the human language it's symbolic. It allows for an expression of past and present and future events, hypothetical scenarios, even abstract concepts. It's far more advanced and versatile than any communication system of any other animal. But this highly advanced and complex and terribly dynamic and terribly engaging tool doesn't really get the attention it deserves in the workplace. I mean, it happens, but it doesn't get attention. We simply don't use it enough. Sometimes we don't use it at all. We certainly don't exploit its true potential. I submit that if we could exploit its true potential, we would very simply eliminate most of the people problems, certainly, and even better, we would optimize all of the people opportunities that we aspire to. All of them. I really believe that. I get it. Like, this is easier said than done. And conversations in and of themselves are a hell of a lot easier than actually having meaningful, effective, and productive conversations. But just start by making sure that they're happening. Like, the one question any HR professional, talent professional should ask most often in their day should be, did you have a conversation about that? The one thing any manager or leader should say most often in their day should be, let's talk about that. And here's the thing that actually I get stuck on the most, and I think we all miss it the most. The one thing any employee should ask most often in their day should be, can we talk about that? I mean, I don't know of many managers who won't at least try to solve a problem or respond to an opportunity that an employee presents. Why don't employees speak up? Why don't they initiate the conversation? Why don't they express their interest, their curiosity? Maybe that's where we go wrong. I mean, managers are busy. Let's assume positive intentions and nudge them every now and then. Get in their faces even. Start the conversation. And if a manager doesn't do anything about it or tells you to bug off, then we have another issue entirely. But I'm convinced that most of these conversations just never even get started. So how the hell are we going to do anything about it? In a prior life, as Greg mentioned, I built a company that offered a workplace culture assessment tool and an analytics platform. The company was purchased by another in 2018. But in that time, we worked with dozens of companies, large and small, and gathered hundreds of thousands of data points literally on culture and on the behaviors and the actions and the words that seem to correlate most with things like engagement and intent to stay and willingness to put forth discretionary effort, etc. I went back and scoured for this presentation the open comment data set that we had, and most of that data set came from the responses to one question: what would it take to heighten the likelihood that you would recommend someone you respect to this company for employment? And while my analysis for this presentation isn't necessarily empirical, I'm pretty confident that the majority of those comments, issues, concerns, and recommendations could have easily been mitigated, addressed, or advanced through a conversation. Whether before the comment was made or after, a conversation was the answer. If it started, not a program, not a policy, not a technology, not really any other resource, just a conversation. So what I tried to do is just take a smattering and throw them up there so that we kind of explore it. To make it interesting, I did a randomly generated selection of just 3 comments, and I can't prove that to you, but you can trust me for the sake of this conversation that these are indeed randomly generated from that data set. So the first, present strategy during company-wide meetings. So please tell me why someone isn't talking to this poor soul about the company strategy. That's a conversation. It's not a company-wide meeting. It doesn't even have to be a team meeting. And if this employee asks their manager to explain the company's strategy and they can't respond effectively, like that's another issue entirely. And it probably means that their manager hasn't had a good conversation with them about it. And if you're the employee sitting there wondering about the company's strategy, why wouldn't you go ask someone and keep asking someone until you actually got a response that made sense? Why would you wait for a survey to tell them you didn't understand it? I mean, we see these comments all the time and they baffle me. Here's the second. We need to set realistic sales goals. I've heard the goals are too aggressive. Okay. Maybe that's true. But who have you heard this from? I bet you it was an underperforming salesperson. If you're an HR person analyzing these survey results, go sit down with a sales leader who you trust and ask them how they would respond to this comment. And bring this person's manager with you. Does that manager even know anything about how the sales goals are established? Might be an interesting thing for them to learn themselves. And who knows where that conversation goes. If you get an answer from the leader, that sales leader, that you like, it doesn't matter what it is, go get the manager to go share it with the employee. And if you get an answer that you don't like, ask the leader if it's okay to share it with the employee. And if they say no, then press them to give you a different answer that you can, in fact, share. If they insist that is the answer, then go talk to that leader's leader and ask them if this is what they want you to say. And if they say yes, and you still think it's a stupid answer, go share or go talk with that person's employee and go, or manager, and go up and up and up and up until you get the answer that you're looking for. And if you keep getting the same answer, then guess what? That is the answer, and it's unlikely to change. But now the employee knows one way or the other, and someone took the time to have the conversation with them. We may not change the sales targeting process as a result of the conversation, but now the employee hasn't heard. He or she knows. And guess what? Have that same conversation with everyone else on the team. Hey, we understand that you'd like to learn more about the sales targeting process. Let's talk about it. Done. So I've watched on countless occasions my teammate badmouth others on this team, and it's killing our vibe. Okay, come on. How is this making its way to an employee survey? Go find this employee, and the very first thing you ask them is, have you talked with your teammate about this? If the answer is no, and it likely will be, then ask them why. They'll have all sorts of excuses. It's hard. I don't want to piss them off. It's not my job. Guess what? It is hard. And you might have to piss him off. But then it's on him. And it is your job. You have to have that conversation. You have to have that conversation. I'm not going to go have that conversation for you until you've done it yourself. That's not my job as an HR professional. My job is to help you have that conversation first. I mean, these are simple examples. They are endless, though. And I get that I'm not bringing any huge revelations to you here. Again, I think this is, in fact, maybe more of a public service announcement. But I hope that I'm reminding you, at the very least, that your job as an HR or talent professional, or as a manager and leader, or as an employee, your job is to make sure conversations happen. And more often than not, your job is to make sure others, the right people, are having those conversations. Make conversations happen. Nudge, encourage, remind, force them if you have to. But from the conversation, all else will flow. That is basically it for me. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Would love to get to know you better and hang out. And thanks again, Inspiring Workplaces, Amy, Greg, and others for having me.
Charlie, thank you so much. That was very interesting. So much there that I was laughing at in the background. I think your first statement about why is employee experience so hard, I was literally like laughing out loud. So you're right. It's this common sense that we've somehow lost and try to make things more difficult than it really is. I really liked your reference of the Surgeon General's report about isolation and loneliness. I think that's so important at this point right now. Even so much that it's impacted me as well. Working from home, being a consultant with my own business, even though I have employees, they're all remote. I found that I was really scared to be around people. I didn't want to deal with people because I was in that mode of, if you meet with, especially in New York, with the pandemic and things like that, if you got near people, you could get sick, you could die. And
Sure.
There's so many people that passed away in New York City. So it just became this, self-preservation type thing. And then when you actually have to get in front of people, mask, no mask, whatever, it's difficult. I found it difficult at that point. So it's been a journey for me to get back to that thing. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think that's something that a lot of people haven't considered, especially with their employees and things like that, and how to engage them more and get them back into those conversations that we need to have. And then I think really what you're talking about is conversations over assumptions. Everybody just based everything on assumptions, and they don't have those conversations. But you're right. Employee engagement surveys, there's a wealth of information there that lets you know what's not happening and what you need to go back and talk about. So I thought your three examples were just spot on. I think the biggest thing for me is always, do we have the right managers in the right roles? Because that's a hindrance to some of that. But that's a different thing for this as well.
Sure. Yeah.
Really, really fascinating. So simple, and I think that's what made your talk so powerful. It's simple. It's something anybody can do at any level. You don't have to be a manager. You can be an employee, but just start those conversations and learn what you don't know and find out, what other people are thinking.
Yeah. Thanks for putting the cap on. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I knew I was going to like it. I liked it even more than I thought. So it wasn't undersold at all, in my opinion. Okay.
I'm glad. Thank you.
Great. Charlie, thank you so much. I appreciate you joining us today.